Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to see such a jam-packed room for our fireside chat with Antti. We'll cover the media planning and how you can get ready for the global launch. My name is Fodor. I'm a founder of AppAgent, mobile marketing experts for hire. We help companies to grow on mobile through marketing strategy, data analytics, creative services, and user acquisition. And we work, for example, for InnoGames, Pixonic, Starbreeze, and also Small Giant Games, where Antti works. Antti, welcome.
Thank
you. Please tell us a few words about what you do, who you are, and then we can progress to our topics. And grab a chair.
Oh, grab a chair first? Okay. So, Antti Paikkala is my name. I work at Small Giant Games. I've been at Small Giant now for a good year and a half. And before that, I spent almost 5 years at Rovio in various roles, starting in licensing and then some finance-related support. And then after that, got the opportunity internally to move over to work on mobile games and mobile games marketing. And that's where I sort of found my place in the world. And now I'm with, got the opportunity to make some good connections. And from there, move over to Small Giant Games to work on Empires and Puzzles, our most recent game that's not been doing too bad lately.
The company was founded in 2013, and you are about 30 people now. How big is the marketing department?
The marketing department now consists of a UA lead, 2 UA managers, and 2 motion graphic designers, so a total of 5.
So it's still a rather lean team. When we compare your achievements, the game is doing extremely well. We'll show you 10 seconds of the gameplay for those who don't have seen it yet, and then we will tell you how the game is doing, because what Antti and his team at Small Giant Games achieved is amazing. So it's basically match-free, mixed with RPG elements. Mm-hmm. It's out for almost a year and a half, and what's great about it is that it was awarded by Google recently, and also you achieved to get into top 10 grossing in US charts. It might seem as an overnight success, but the opposite is true. This is your 3rd game. Mm-hmm. 2 previous sort of failed. What have you learned from these past experiences?
Well, they failed in the sense that they did teach us that what we really want to do and what we really needed as a company was to do a pivot of what we were doing before. So we made a game called Oddwings, and then we made another game called Rope Racers that were multiplayer games and really focusing on being very casual, being very sort of ad monetized based, and really trying to create beautiful design, well-created game design, well-created art, and focusing on that side of the pie. But then at some point, we noticed that while they were great products in what they sent out to achieve, they didn't get that commercial level of success that we wanted. So then we decided to look at the market. We did a rigorous process of what is currently in the top 100 grossing. That was our plan. How do we get to top 100 grossing in terms of games, and how do we do it in the US? So we did a lot of soul searching. I did a lot of market analysis in terms of genres, in terms of gameplay, mechanics, art, everything. And then we ended up with this niche of combining simple, approachable match 3 gameplay with a more deep sort of metagame in terms of collecting heroes, beating monsters collectively with teams, adding more sort of boss fights, all kinds of things that you can test out for yourself downloading Empires and Puzzles.
You mentioned success, benchmarks. How do you set KPIs for soft launch?
Well, for soft launch of a game, I'd say your primary needs as a marketer, so thinking primarily as a marketer, sure, is listening to your product team. That should be objective number 1 and 2 and 3 and 5, because the product team will be able to really say what is needed in order to test hypotheses for yourself, to try out various things in creative, try out various things on App Store, but primarily you're really serving the needs of the product in terms of, does it run, does it scale, mm-hmm, is it able to achieve the goals that is necessary to scale up at some point.
And do you as a marketer set some own KPIs, such as conversion rate in the store or CPI, whatever else? Or are you looking at soft launching more holistically in terms of the overall performance and the lifetime value versus the cost per acquisition cost?
I would say that in the very beginning, during the soft launch, odds are you're not going to make money on your campaigns.
Sure.
Unfortunately, that's just true. And in the very beginning, you're really looking at A, serving the product, B, making sure product has everything they need. And then after that, you can measure CPI in your genre. There's a couple of good ways of figuring out. For example, Chartboost has some really good free tools available for gauging CPI.
Chartboost Insights.
Then you can go to your Facebook representatives, your Unity representatives, get a view of the market in terms of reviewing your category. But really, conversion is a very important thing. You can do great things with low conversion, you can do great with high. But really, during the soft launch, you're going to get some level of marketing realities. But really, you want to sustain the game first.
I mentioned that you struggled a bit with conversion rates, and that led you to complete redesign of the game when it comes to packaging, so how it looks and feels. So tell us in a few words about the change from the rather hardcore look to more like casual style, which is now what we see in the App Store and Play Store.
Right. So the image up here is a sort of the left side image is from the beginning of our soft launch, where we really aimed to go at a very sort of specific niche, so quite male-dominated, quite sort of frowny, and very sort of serious approach to creating an RPG game. Which you can see, there's a lot of dark colors, there's a lot of sort of attacking main person that's coming at the player, and obviously a male hero so creating more of a sort of aggressive feel. And then during testing, we noticed that it's probably a bit too expensive. It's probably not really getting us where we want to go. So then we have a genius pair of founding art directors based in wonderful city of Tampere in Finland, and they sort of turned us around, and we got to a point where what can we do to make it a bit more approachable? So we went with a lot lighter color palette, a lot more smiley. So you can see on the right there's a couple of more approachable looking faces. There's a female lead, very sort of noticeable at that with the red hair and everything. So definitely came out for us from the marketing point of view, but also for our players. I think it's more engaging to really go for something approachable.
With my two cents to this, Antti mentioned that the game metrics were pretty good, whereas the top of the funnel was where they struggled the most, which led them to the conclusion that the problem is not in the product itself, rather in the packaging. And then you tested several concepts, which finally turned out to be this new visual style. So let's go to the question where to start a soft launch. How's your approach when it comes to selecting test markets? And then also in general, when you are launching the game globally, you also have to pick some countries. So what's your methodology and which data you use for the selection process?
I think we can actually move to the next slide even here. So there's quite a bit of background research that you want to go through here. So looking into geo-population, looking into affluency of a country, looking into potential targeting. You can already test either on Facebook or then rewarded networks or whatever. That you can do at an early stage. But generally, you want to kind of find a feel of really affluency, spending depth, depending, of course, on the game type. For us, as an IP-driven game, it's necessary. But also not going the obvious way of only looking at Canada, only looking at Australia, because those are really competitive markets. And pricing might surprise you, especially if you're on a lower budget.
Sure. The next question goes to the acquisition itself. There are basically two approaches how to acquire users during the soft launch, either in like waves or cohorts, or to have a continuous number of DAUs. What do you prefer and why? I'd
say that, especially for a soft launch, it's Especially during a soft launch, it's important to keep the rate as even as possible. Again, for product, to make sure that they have a solid foundation of testing things, but also for you, it's much more measurable. It's for a marketer, it's always important to stay consistent, and consistency is what you want to go for.
Have you defined any certain threshold of DAUs you want to keep throughout the soft launch? Like 5,000, 10,000, 50,000, just to give some ballpark figure to the audience.
I wish I had 50,000 daily actives in a soft launch, but it can be challenging to find that level. But really, you want to be at least in the hundreds in terms of new daily installs to be able to build that daily active space, and then you can start experimenting and start doing at least some level of, while not fully mathematically viable cohorts, then at least having an idea.
Cool. So how many networks do you test during soft launch? I assume that you start on those two biggest ones, Facebook and AdWords, but you also mentioned that you fairly quickly start testing video networks. So what's your approach? At which stage you broaden your channels, and how many you have tested by the end of the soft launch?
Well, ideally, you want to test as broad as possible, even in the beginning. So, launching with launching with social networks, launching with universal app campaigns, launching with rewarded, I should say, video ad networks as well. Because then you'll have an idea when if you've set up your analytics right, you'll have an idea of the profiles of the different users you'll get from all of these. So, you want to go pretty broad. So, upwards of 5 partners, like from the very beginning.
How many you use today?
We're depending on bit of time of the year, we're currently running up even up to like 10 networks at a time, but not always.
Cool. So here's your simplified overview of metrics for different networks, which is what you do most of the time when running soft launch, comparing different channels, how they perform. So tell us more about this. What's your general approach and the main KPI you look at?
Right. So the chart here might be so return on ad spend might be a bit more ambitious during a soft launch, but I wanted to keep it here just for like the consistency of running campaigns. So here in the chart you'll see a couple of ways to evaluate fairly consistently the performance of a network. So how much money you spent, how many installs you got for that, and then calculating out CPI, and then from a game analytics point of view, looking at your payer rate and your just measuring out based on your modeling what your LTV ends up looking like. And then when you have LTV, you have cohorts, and then the more time elapses, the more accurate your model becomes, and that allows you to then measure return on ad spend a bit more effectively.
Your user base is all around the globe.
Yep.
Do you also use some regionally specific networks, such as MyTarget in Russia?
At some point, you definitely want to. So that completely depends on the profile of your game. So we're going for a pretty broad audience, and my target has definitely been I should say my target or WeChat or Viber or any specific like quite geo-specific acquisition platforms can be viable for you. But I'd say in the very beginning, all you need is a couple of the bigger players out there that can address a wider variety.
What about your budget split? I hear quite often that the vast majority of budget is spent on Facebook and Google Ads, whereas in gaming it might be true that also video networks play a big part of the media mix. How is it today for you? And what would you generally recommend to the audience where to start, and which networks you would recommend to test at first place?
Sure. So from our point of view, we've always had the mentality of not really being that, or being very agnostic in terms of wherever we see value, that's where we're going to buy. So whether or not that means Facebook or AdWords or something else, or that's where we'll sort of exploit that network and try to make sure we spend as much as possible, which usually means that we're getting as much value out of it as well, if our modeling is correct and if everything goes our way. So I wouldn't necessarily be able to give you an answer on that.
Talking about modeling, marketing analytics is something what you need to have to run efficient campaigns. You developed your own tool. Could you imagine doing your job without marketing analytics, using just attribution provider or Facebook Business Manager, and how early in the life cycle you need to have such tool in place to do a good job?
I could imagine it. I wouldn't want to imagine it. It is quite challenging, to be frank. There's a lot of good providers of analytics tools out there. We decided very early on we're building our own, just because we control the data. We don't have to share everything from the very beginning to a third party. Of course, we do now with attribution and all that. But it's just very important for you to keep control, keep data, and also you're able to create your own models more efficiently with everything built in-house. So it is a toll, but for us it was definitely worth it.
Great. We have 5 minutes left for now. Time is running up. So last couple of questions. What are the major components of the global launch plan from your perspective? And how many territories and also channels would you recommend to use for the first month? And also if you can advise the audience about the budget necessary to successfully launch an ambitious game like yours.
Sure. We're going to have the chart.
The chart is...
we'll see what goes on.
Here.
Yay. Support. Good. So here's a hypothetical, very simplified model of a media plan. So from the very beginning, the budget is going to dictate very much of what you're able to do. So for a lot of studios, this means that either it's internal funding, is it some kind of seed round, some kind of other amounts that your CEO or finance team or whoever sits on top of your pile of money is going to be able to allocate to you. And that's, of course, then an internal process of us as a marketer trying to get as much money as possible because we're confident in the product. But really, you want to start where, with your soft launch, you want to start where your intel is the strongest. Is this going to resonate in English-speaking markets? Is this going to resonate in a high affluency kind of market, or is it going to be more wide in terms of approach? So based on that, traditionally, you'd probably, if you're a Western developer, odds are you're going to be focusing your launch on the US. So then, according to the best practices either you had in the past or what your most defined hypothesis is, you want to go country by country, start with the bigger geos, bigger sort of prices as well, because you're not only competing against yourself, you're competing against the market. So that dictates CPI. Again, Chartboost, for example, a good resource for that. And then just being very realistic of what you can spend and charting it out even as simply as here, it makes a big difference when you're planning on how much you can spend.
Let's assume that you will launch a game next week. For how long would you create a media plan, and how flexible you will be adjusting to new data coming in, or let's say impact of featuring and other aspects? So would you follow the plan rigorously or change it after 3 days after the global launch?
You'll probably see like market realities very quickly after a few days. So there's one, how much volume you're actually getting, but then two, how much you're able to spend and like how much is left of your budget. So I'd say based on that, after a few days, you'll have a good idea of what the next few weeks are going to look like. And then after that, you just have to sort of ask your finance team and your management to make themselves available with additional budget if it looks like this is really going to work out. That's just the case. You'll have to unfortunately make this day.
My very last question for today goes to your recipe for the global launch success. So if you can address 3 major components of your success or your general idea about what's necessary to succeed in today's very competitive environment.
Sure. So one thing would be the work you do during like even beginning the soft launch is really scoping out the market, really understanding what you're up against, and based on that, create a product that you're comfortable with. Number 2 is basically based on that, create a plan, create a strategy, create a media plan based on the best possible knowledge that you have available, based on, let's say, talking to networks, let's say, learning on your soft launch goals, and based on the ambition you've been able to make with your product. And then basically, thirdly, you just need to have a lot of money. That's be ambitious and be honest with yourself that launching a big, especially big new game is going to be expensive. That's what's going to happen. Like in the long run, you're going to have to be consistent with marketing. That's from a marketer. That's at least my point of view. There are, of course, organic growth stories. There's massively profitable organic companies that do lots of their downloads that way. But that's just what I've seen.
And that's a wrap. Thanks, Antti, for coming.
Thank you.